Since its inception, America seems to be all about uniting. The preamble to the American Constitution starts out, "We, the people." That seems to suggest a group, a united group. The next words after "we, the people" are as follows: the United States. Again, united. The words that follow that are in order to form a more perfect union. So right off the bat, we have three references that clearly seem to suggest unity of some sort. We the people, then of the United States, and then in order to form a more perfect union. It would seem quite clear that the framers of our American Constitution and our forefathers were pretty big on this idea of unions and unity. And of course, most of us have heard the phrase, "United we stand, divided we fall." And Abraham Lincoln said something along the lines of, "A house divided shall not stand." Again, unity seems to really be as American as apple pie and Chevrolet. So why then is so much money thrown at propagandists who use the same technique as Joseph Goebbels and Charles Manson to day in and day out convince people who listen to them that unions are somehow bad for America? Are you familiar with the Union Arc of Prosperity? The Union Arc of Prosperity clearly demonstrates that from 1932, after the first Republican-caused Great Depression in America, unions began to grow. And along with the growing numbers in unions, so did the growth of American prosperity. Until around 1972, when President Nixon opened up the doors to trade with China and actually gave China an advantage over American workers when it came to trade, as Chinese workers worked for pennies, where American workers actually worked for a halfway decent living wage. So it was about that time, 1972, that the Union Arc of Prosperity began to wane. And, well, after Ronald Reagan came in, President Reagan, he began to do his best to dismantle unions. Following that became the Great Campaign by the propagandist, mostly on the right-wing talk radio, and then followed by Fox. As you can see, here we are on the other side of where we reached the pinnacle of the Union Arc of Prosperity, and we are now down to where our wages are extraordinarily flat, and we are really back to where we began back in 1932, just after now the second Republican-caused, let's just say, very close to depression. So, one would certainly want to ask, why then, if it is clearly, the correlation couldn't be clearer, that when unions were strong, so was America, and so too was American democracy. And with the decline in union membership and the dismantling of unions, largely due to policies put in place even by President Bill Clinton, these are what has been the undoing of unions. And here again, clearly the correlation is that along with the shrinking unions' influence in America, so too has average Americans' wealth shrunk. Let's take a moment to look at this ode to the Tea Party, aka the Me Party, and let's look at what it was like in America prior to 1972. And when we had more regulated capitalism, and let's just say unions were stronger, and we had some degree of protectionism. It was very American. Here, if you look at the top line, that represents those with extreme amounts of wealth. These are people that we would go as far as to say they were very rich. Down below is the wealthy. Well, very comfortable people, certainly. They got plenty of money to invest in stocks and the like. Then we have the third line down, representing the middle class, and then below that was the blue-collar class. As you can see, the structure is with the wealth distribution at the bottom. It was, well, it had a good foundation. That you can clearly see. And so, therefore, the wealth was, to use a word, distributed reasonably well for a healthy democracy. Now, compare and contrast that with what we have now. After a tremendous amount of real wealth redistribution from the bottom, the blue-collar class, up to the extremely wealthy. This is a result of deregulation along with the dismantling of unions by various means, including our trade relations with countries such as China. You can look here and see at the top line, now, the extremely wealthy have almost all the wealth. The wealthy below are sitting better than they were, and the middle class now has begun to decline. The line is actually quite a bit shorter. And lastly, the bottom line, the blue-collar class, well, they're almost all, well, essentially broke. One has to wonder, with this trickle-down economics that was really put into place by President Ronald Reagan, even his vice president when he was running against him, George Herbert Walker Bush, he referred to it as voodoo economics. And it's really clear who the voodoo dolls were. They were the middle class and the blue-collar class. Of course, you don't have to take my word for it. It is very evident what has taken place over the last 40 years. Now, when you notice the structure, you can see that this is an extremely unhealthy structure. It is a structure that you can tell is about to collapse upon itself. Again, now, contrast that with what we had when, well, we had hit that zenith of the American arc of Union prosperity. This is a good structure, a sound economic model, if you will. A foundation is very healthy, the blue-collar class, then upon the middle class, then the wealthy, and then, of course, at the very top, the extremely wealthy. Compared with what we have now, you can see a structure about to collapse upon itself. We cannot have a system where all the wealth is concentrated at the top. Well, certainly not if you want to continue to call yourself a democracy. These two graphs do go a long way in explaining why the super wealthy have put so much money and invested so much into the likes of those that again use the same propaganda techniques day in and day out to convince their audience and the American people that unions are in fact bad for America. Of course, the truth is, that could not be further from the truth. Unions made America the greatest nation on earth, and the loss of the unions, the power that they put in the hands of the American workers, has made America extremely vulnerable to all sorts of problems, including becoming a third world nation. Now, of course, you listen to the Republicans, the answer is always, well, privatize, privatize. Government just isn't cutting the mustard. Well, the reason why government isn't doing so well is because they get into government, they purposely make it run like a disaster, and then they have people clamoring, please do something, and their answer is privatization. Well, let me tell you this, and hear me. Privatization means loss of sovereignty. When the roads are owned by the wealthy, you'll have no roads to drive on. And when the military is owned by the wealthy, who's to say you'll be the one they protect? And when the wealthy own every speck of land and it is priced out of the reach of everyone else, what will you do? Go walk in the ocean? Well, before it's over, they'll privatize that too. No, it's really time for the adults to wake up and stop playing games endlessly with every moment that they have spare. Enough of this televised sports occupying a person's entire weekend. It is time to get involved. It is time, for the sake of the children of the future, to return to what made America strong again. And we can start by first recognizing that we are being lied to. We are being manipulated mentally by the likes of, well, these propagandists who care nothing about America. In fact, they could not be more anti-American. They care only about one thing, and that is money. That's right. They would sell out their, in fact, they have sold out America for a fat paycheck. And they get paid again plenty by the very, very wealthy who really like the way things are going. Well, the wealthy need these bozos, these clowns, these anti-American idiots. They need them just the same as Adolf Hitler needed Joseph Goebbels. Just the same, and they do the same mental manipulation as Charles Manson. This is the facts. That is the first thing we need to do. We need to recognize that these people are flat out lying to America. The second thing we need to do to get the ball rolling in the right direction and get America back on track to the prosperity that it once knew, and that is to return to the unions that gave we the people a voice and gave us an ability to have a level playing field, and gave America prosperity and a strong middle class. Yes, the first thing we need to do if we want to ever enjoy the freedoms and the again, prosperity that we knew is to first go back to the unions and to recognize that it is going to be the biggest battle we've ever known, because obviously the power structure loves it that they can call the tune and they have people at each other's throats willing to work for wages lower and lower all the time. Imagine, if you will, that this is you. You are a pencil. And by the way, this pencil was made in China. Yeah, I tried to, but I couldn't find any made in America.